since guns are going to be a big political point this coming political season, they're trying. It's definitely trying to be one of the wedge issues of choice that seems to have traction. So let's go ahead and go into a few stories. Basically, I've got 3 separate events here that really highlight how the whole gun control versus gun rights narrative is basically being hijacked by the 2 extremes of it. And when I have my personal views, it's, you know what, I'm sure I won't agree with more extreme points of view that are contrary to the side I'm on. I'm more than willing to have a debate, but I cannot stand that headlines are being manipulated and that just a narrative is being driven. And it's not just happening in the USA. Okay, so the first incident here is a lemonade stand robbery. Yeah, you heard me right. A kid's lemonade stand was robbed. That in and of itself is just a sad reality. But then to use that as a pawn to instill fear and ignorance in the masses, honestly, I have more respect for the robber than the people who are trying to stir ignorance to create what they want. Alright, so first off, there's 3 sets of headlines for this story. The left reported this as NC police search for armed robber who stole from child's lemonade stand. You know, let's pluck those heartstrings. You know, it was an armed robbery. The horror! A kid's been robbed, been the victim of an armed robbery. The way the UK presented this. 9-year-old boy is robbed of $20 at gunpoint. Gunpoint's in all caps. By teenage thug while manning his lemonade stand. You know, it's like, and that makes sense if you understand anything about the UK and their gun culture and the fact that they've gotten to the point that they now have judges calling for taxes on kitchen knives because there's all this violence in London. Alright. The right, even the right put gun in this. But they kind of did it as a question. North Carolina boy, 9, robbed at gunpoint while selling lemonade. Cops say. So it's more phrased as a question. They couldn't, basically the story was being broken as an armed robbery. If they don't want to lose clicks, they have to also report it, you know, as a gunpoint or armed robbery. But they put the qualifier on the end of cops say, like, well, okay, this is how it's described. Would you like to know more? His Starship Troopers reference here. Here's the facts of what happened in this incident. A kid was robbed by a teenager. At least the assumption is it's a teenager, because they don't actually know who did it. Who stuck a BB gun to the kid's gut and then ran off, ditched their disguise, and the cops are pretty sure they ran off on a stored bicycle. So if you actually read into the details of this, you're like, what? Wait a minute. This is all about a BB gun? But it's not reported that way. Armed robbery, gunpoint, at gunpoint. You know, because guns, they're coming for you, guns. On the 180, we have a good guy with a gun incident. Center reported it in the same questioning. Well, we can't claim it was a good guy with a gun, you know. Suspected gunman shot by bystanders at back-to-school event remains hospitalized. You know, it's there's this poor victim that went to go shoot up a back-to-school event recently. You know, they're hospitalized. Guns are bad. That's how the center is reporting this good guy with a gun incident. How the right is reporting the gun guy with a gun incident. Gunman shot by Florida armed bystander still hospitalized. NRA says shooting example of good guy with gun. So they're hanging a lantern on it. You know, here's that mythic unicorn of the lawfully armed private citizen putting an end to a tragedy. The left could not be bothered to cover this story. It doesn't fit their gun control narrative. So we have an incident that's basically trying to get everybody in fear. That's all about a BB gun. And then we have an incident that is the proverbial mythic unicorn of good guy with gun stops bad guy with gun. And it doesn't fit into the gun control narrative, so it doesn't even get covered. It gets covered very questionably by those trying to stay in the middle, because they don't want to piss off the left. You know, they don't want to be anti-gun control narrative, so it's very questioning. You know, well, this person hasn't been proven to be the shooter yet. We haven't had a trial yet, even though it's on tape. You know, even though this is on tape and it happened, you know, they're a suspect. You know, and that's ethical journalism, albeit a little misleading. And then obviously the pro-gun right is like, oh, see, here they are. Here's the mythic unicorns. They do exist. Can we have the conversation now? And on that front, a story that's not really getting covered by the United States, because it basically all the pro-gun control stuff is like, well, it's too easy to get a gun in the United States. You know, we have these mass shootings. We have to be afraid of our fully semi-automatics. Yes, I said fully semi-automatic, fully satirically, because I do know the difference between auto, semi-auto, and bolt or single actions and so forth. I find it comical that we have to have this conversation treating made up and terms as if they're interchangeable, and we can't be factual about what firearms can actually do. I'm kind of more in the middle on this issue, just so you know my bias. That's a whole different video. We've had mass stabbings. That's kind of a straw man argument, because why we have had stabbings where somebody goes into a bus and basically stabs 10 plus people. It is a valid argument that, well, that's a confined area and you can't do the same thing in a giant crowd unless everybody's not paying attention. Which there are times that happens too, but, I will give that. However, there's been a mass shooting in the UK. You heard me right. In the land of gun control, and one of the nations that's always on that list of, well, they don't allow everybody to have a gun without any reason or thing or so on and so forth. And it's being reported by Asian news. 10 people hurt in shooting in UK's Manchester, because it was a Manchester shooting. Basically, somebody unloaded into a group of people. The New York Times is one of the few U.S. sources that bothered to cover this, but I don't think it's going to actually make the national rounds here, because it bringing it in as an inflammatory news line to keep the mass shooting, mass shooting, mass shooting, because let's face it, the average American is so ignorant that if you report the headline as Manchester shooting after carnival leaves at least 10 injured. Okay, so it's a mass shooting, 10, and it's after a carnival. Oh my God, think of the children. And you threw Manchester in there, but, the reality is, I would bet you half of Americans don't know Manchester's in the UK. I would bet that. They're like, Manchester, is that like in the northeast somewhere? We're very ignorant people when it comes to global geography. It's laughable. And an additional source reported that 10 people hospitalized after shooting in Manchester. Alright, here's the details of this Manchester shooting, just to get Americans understanding. This was done with a frickin' shotgun. Now, when they were talking about people hurt by pellets, If you go into the comments for some of these stories, there'll be people like, pellets? That means it was a BB gun. Again, proving that there's ignorance about firearms on all sides. Now, the actual realities is somebody basically unloaded shotgun shells into a group of people. I'm not making any suggestions of actions, but this kind of shows the insanity that we're going to stop mass shootings with gun control rather than solving the real issues that make someone want to be a shooter in the first place. Again, I'm not necessarily anti-gun control and regulation and so on, but let's be honest about what the real problem is, and that if somebody really wants to create mass damage and harm or kill lots of people, there is so many ways they can do that if they really, really want to. So we need to be honest about why they want to and looking at these things, because you'll probably start a civil war in the United States if you go try and confiscate everybody's shotguns. I'm just being honest. So think about the issue, think about how you're being manipulated, and really think about, is that headline a fair representation of the actual facts of what actually happened? Or just maybe, are you letting yourself get bogged down into an echo chamber that's telling you what you want to hear to be comfortable in the fear that you're okay with, rather than using that noggin you were given to think about the issue? Hi everyone, you made it to the end of the video. Congratulations! Almost no one does. At least that's what the analytics say here on YouTube. You know, since you made it this far, you might want to consider going one more click and expanding that description down there, and go ahead and clicking over to Patreon and become a patron and contributor. If not, you'll also find it over in the channel page. But hey, regardless, there's this like-dislike thing, so by all means, downvote if you think I should shut up, or upvote if you'd like to hear more. And if you really feel inclined to do, at least you can do a subscribe. But hey, it's up to you.